Welcome to Let's Turn the Tide podcast. I'm your host, Nadine Zidani, sustainability and climate activist, consultant, and coach. In today's episode, we'll talk about a major problem that affects us all, plastic pollution. Did you know that only 9% of plastic waste is recycled worldwide? And the rest is either burned, dumped in landfills, or mismanaged. On June 5th, we celebrated World Environment Day. And the theme for this year was Beat Plastic Pollution, highlighting the fact that we need to take an urgent action to fight plastic pollution. So in today's episode, we will be focusing on plastic pollution, and especially in the UAE and the Middle East. We will explore together the innovative solutions, the challenges we face, and inspiring initiatives that we could implement. And to do so, we brought amazing experts to the table. So I'm going to start by Sara Jackson. Sara, welcome to the podcast. Can you quickly introduce yourself?
Thank you, Nadine. So I am the executive director of a small consultancy called Green Ethics. And I help industry to transform to the circular economy here in the UAE, in Saudi and in other countries in the GCC.
Welcome, Sara. Thank you for joining us. Moving on to Monir Bou Ghanem. Can you quickly introduce yourself, Monir?
Hello, my name is Monir Bou Ghanem, and I'm a policy advisor at the Environment Agency in Abu Dhabi. And I'm working on the implementation of the Abu Dhabi single-use plastic policy.
Super. Thank you, Monir. And I know you're coming from Abu Dhabi, so thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome, Ronald Richa. Can you quickly introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Nadine, for the introduction. Hi, my name is Ronald Richa. I'm a project director at Veolia, and I'm in charge, among others, for implementing plastic recycling projects for Veolia across the Middle East.
Super. Thank you for joining us today.
You.
So I want to start our conversation by a very simple question. Why is plastic bad?
You want me to kick off?
Yes, please.
I'm going to challenge the statement. Plastic per se is not bad. What is bad is the way we manage plastic at the end of its life. Because plastic is an extremely versatile material. You find it in aviation, in automotive, in packaging, in clothing, in soft furnishings. I mean, it's absolutely everywhere, right? And when you think about packaging as an example, if you want to feed 8 billion people on Earth with safe and hygienic food and beverage, today we don't have a sustainable alternative to plastic. So what is bad is the fact that plastic goes into the environment, that it's not managed adequately at the end of its life cycle, so post-consumer, in other words. And that's where there's a whole conversation that needs to be had, because it's not only plastic that, when it goes to the environment, is bad for the environment. It's the very versatility and the characteristics of plastic that actually make it bad for the environment. It's exactly the reason why it's bad for the environment. So we really have to do a lot to manage the material after it's been used. That's, for me, the critical element.
And how does it affect, our environment and us as well as human beings, because it has an effect on us?
Well, I mean, obviously it's bad for the environment. Microplastics are everywhere. We know the story about microplastics in breast milk that have been proven by studies. We know that most of our environments are seriously contaminated with microplastic. And because the plastic material lasts for a seriously long time, it remains an issue that has really created a huge problem environmentally, not just environmentally. When you think about pollution per se, plastic is the emerging issue for our time, I think.
So, Monir, what do you think of Sara's statement saying that plastic is not really bad? It's more the way we manage it and the end of use of plastic. What do you think about that?
I agree with that. Plastic is not bad. It's an integral part of our life. I could add to the key challenge that she mentioned, that the plastic becomes bad when it gets to the environment. I think this is one element. The other element is that overconsumption of plastic and any other packaging material is quite challenging for us. So what is bad is overconsumption, and what is bad is the leak of the used material to the environment, whether marine or terrestrial environment, which ends up not only affecting the wildlife and the environment as a whole, but it affects human beings. It gets to the food chain of humans.
Okay, interesting. And Ronald, do you share the same point of view as Sara and then Monir?
It's an amazing introduction to the topic, actually. I mean, most of the things has been said. We need to start looking of how we can capture this plastic and avoid of having the plastic leaking to the environment. We need to start by educating ourselves as consumers. Start by myself, by my kids, by our kids. We need to start to put in place the right infrastructure to collect this plastic and the packaging in general. We need to start by segregating, going deep into the knowledge of the different type of plastic, because there's no one plastic, there's different plastics that can have different characteristics and different impact, and therefore different way of recycling them. And we need to start recycling, and we start also as industry and as consumers to accept to have packages made of recycled plastic, products made of recycled plastic. This is of essence. The debate is not if plastic is bad or not. Yes, as you said, yeah, when it leaks, when it goes, because of the life cycle of the plastic, there's a huge impact of this plastic. But it changed our modern life, the plastic, like a lot of other material. How we can capture it, how we can segregate it properly, how we can understand it, and therefore how we can recycle it and where to recycle it. This is key topic that we at Veolia were working on every day.
Okay. So the challenge is not to get rid of plastic, if I'm hearing you well. This is not what we're trying to achieve.
I think it's almost impossible to get rid of plastic. The challenge is in understanding why do we consume that much. This is number one. Do we really need all these packaging material flow and around the world, and in buying our groceries? If we go to the supermarket and look at the shelves and the way things are packaged, do we really want all these types of packaging? Do we really want all these plastic bags or any type of bags? When we go to supermarkets, we have made some substantial effort in Abu Dhabi Emirate around these things, and I could tell you that the results are amazing. Life continued in Abu Dhabi with less 172 million plastic bags were avoided last year, and I don't think that the life of consumers have been affected dramatically because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And where this plastic is coming from, if you can elaborate a little bit on the sources of plastic pollution. Is it industries? What kind of industries? If you can give us more insights.
I think that, if you allow me, I think the main challenging part of this is the plastic used by consumers, by individuals. Plastic that is used in commercial or industrial activities, or like what she mentioned, aviations and things like that. Most of it are, the whole system is based on a certain type of management of what comes out of it. But when plastic becomes municipal solid waste, then we have an issue with it. When plastic becomes a commodity that we take with us to the sea or to the desert, wherever we go for any reason, whether to work or for leisure or something like that, the average using time of a plastic bag is less than 10 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. Can you imagine? So I could tell you that many of the plastic bags that we buy them, most of the times we take them from the counter, we go outside, just outside the baqala or the shop or the gas station or something like that, we take the plastic bag and we throw it, and we take the plastic bottle and we drink from it that we bought it inside.
To jump on what Monir said, historically, in general, the waste management in the commercial and industrial activity has been channeled in a better way by the regulations, but everything that has been implanted so far, than what we generate as a consumer at our houses and where we live or where we. So far, the way waste in general and plastics and other and industrial commercial activities are much more, or let's say better managed than the management of our day-to-day packaging, the way that we consume. So now the new challenge is how to better channel all the plastics and pollutions and packaging that are generated by households. And this is the main challenge of the authorities, the regulatory environment, and the citizens, the private sector, etc., etc. This is the focus will be, and this is the mainstreams. This is where the mainstreams are today.
So you touched upon recycling, which is kind of a big issue in the UAE, if I may say. So when it comes to plastic recycling, do you have any data on public perception around plastic recycling, or the level of awareness, in the UAE? Because it's something, it's very difficult to kind of understand where we stand.
Yeah, and actually, in 2022, Veolia conducted a worldwide study called the Barometer of Ecological Transformation on several countries. UAE were part of the scope of the study, and it gave some very, very interesting key learning. Somehow we were a little bit surprised and positively surprised. 80% of the people that were interrogated during this study are aware that there's something changing in the world. There's a climate crisis happening, and they feel the urge to do something. And this is quite surprising because we were not expecting this level of awareness from a global point of view. Now then, 60% says it's because of the human activity. The other says, we don't know, maybe a little bit skeptical and so on. There's always skeptical people. And when we ask them, okay, so you acknowledge that there's something happening now, okay, what do we do? Are you ready to do an action? 70% say, yes, we want to do an action. The actions are a little bit scattered, not very organized. But what comes at the top of the action that were mentioned are actions around recycling. 80% says we want to recycle at source. 75% says that we are ready to buy products with recycled material. Others said that we need to look to the material before we buy, etc. So it's around waste management, recycling, doing small actions on the day-to-day in order to make the change. And last but not least, 70% of them says sooner or later it will cost the consumer something. So they start acknowledging the fact that in terms of cost, there's the cost. Now, who's going to bear the cost? This is the big debate today around people and around the professional and the public and private sector. Okay, who's going to bear, how it will be split? But there is a good awareness in the UAE that we can start using to develop and implement actions.
That's very interesting because I was not expecting such figures, honestly. Yeah.
So we were also surprised by the outcome of this study.
We have conducted a survey while developing the Abu Dhabi single-use plastic policy together between the Environment Agency and the Ministry of Climate Change and the Environment. It covered 2,700 respondents from the UAE. The level of awareness and the ambition of the targeted segment of the community was really high. More than 98%, they said they are willing to pay an extra fee for single-use reusable products, like replacement of single-use bags, and almost 99+% they consider this as a key challenge that requires to be addressed very soon.
Yeah, but that's very interesting because we have this big issue of plastic pollution, we have the consumers, the end consumers, ready to take action. And I want to know what's happening in between. You know, where do we stand right now when it comes to circular economy and, you know, plastic pollution and plastic action in the UAE? Can you, Sara, Monir, I know you're very much involved. Can you tell us, you know, what's going on?
So look, there's two aspects to that. The one is what is industry doing, and the other one is what is government doing. And I'll let Monir talk to what the government is doing. Within industry, when you look at the big multinational companies, they've already got significant commitments about eliminating unnecessary packaging, about reducing virgin usage in their packaging, making sure that 100% of their packaging materials is 100% recyclable by 2025. And many of the companies have also made commitments on recovering and collecting 100% of the material that they actually sell in the market, right? So those commitments are actually work in progress, and many of the companies like Nestle or Unilever are already almost 80% reaching that target that they need to do. The question is you need the ecosystem, and you need the infrastructure, and you need the policy regulation that mandates source segregation, as an example. You need the right infrastructure to sort and bale materials, so material recovery facilities. You need the right recycling infrastructure. So I think it's these two pieces of the puzzle that have to come together. What's in the middle is there's the intention from industry. There's definitely an intention from government. I think the UAE is the first country in the GCC to publish a circular economy policy. They have a circular economy council. They have a circular economy policy committee where industry has been able to propose policy recommendations that will support the circular economy. And of the 22 policy regulations that were just recently approved by Cabinet here in the UAE in March of this year, 12 of those are related to the waste management sector and how to put that infrastructure in place, how to make sure that that intention from the consumer can be made a reality in terms of, okay, where do I go? How do I recycle? Where can I drop off my materials? How are those materials sorted? How are they then recycled?
Yeah. And Monir, what can you add to Sara actually on the regulatory framework? What's going on right now and where do we stand?
Well, getting to a circular economy, that's a long journey. Other countries took them many years to develop the whole ecosystem, as Sara called it. From our perspective, when we started with the single-use plastic as a case for demonstrating that things could work. What I could tell you that we have developed a regulation, a single-use plastic regulation in Abu Dhabi, which has set specific articles on what we call extended producer responsibility and try to organize the handling of products, whether they are recovered or whether they are in the supply chain, and trying to allocate responsibilities across the supply chain. So what I could say that from our experience, regulatory instruments, usually they take longer time frame, and we rely a lot on partnership. It's a collective responsibility between us and the private sector to work together, and the community, different community actors can play a very supporting role. We have achieved a lot through this partnership. So instead of setting the regulatory bar first and trying to put everybody under it, we are trying to work in a collaborative way with the private sector to maybe get better results, and then the regulation would follow along the way.
I'd love to hear, the view of Veolia, because you are the infrastructure, as Sara mentioned, in this ecosystem. So
Sara mentioned that the industry is ready, the regulatory body is ready, the recyclers, they're ready or not, the investors in this. I think they are ready. They are bringing a lot of know-how, a lot of technologies, a lot of know-how in how to address this topic to the UAE. Veolia is one of them, and we're working hard on that. I believe also we work a lot on the awareness, because everything starts by the consumers. It starts by the consumers, how he reacts, how he manages his plastic packaging, what is the end of life of what he consumes. In Veolia, we work a lot on this point as well. And for a company like Veolia, who works, it's in our DNA, the recycling and investing in infrastructure and building infrastructure and operating this kind of infrastructure, it's an amazing opportunity to be here.
Fantastic. So things can move fast. And what's interesting is that you all mentioned collaboration. And just for our audience, you all work together. You know each other, actually, the three of you, and you work together, you know, industries, private and public sectors. So it's really amazing. What can we do to foster, you know, this collaboration between public and private? Things are happening, obviously. But what can we do, you know, to accelerate, I would say, this ecological transformation and fight against plastic pollution?
I think from a government perspective, I could see the collaborative spirit in many of the private actors. We have done great achievements together with the private sector initiatives. I can give you an example. In Abu Dhabi, when we banned single-use plastic bags, our plan was to issue a regulation to have a fee on multiple-use bags, because we wanted people eventually to reduce the number of bags, because reusable bags are heavier, and if people consume them as single-use, then we will end up consuming more plastic than before the ban. So for a number of reasons, we couldn't issue the regulation, so we worked with the key retailers, and they came together and they signed a declaration to support the implementation of the policy, and they started charging a fee of 50 fils. That fee of 50 fils led to a decline in the number of bags that reached 95%, which means out of 100 bags on a cash counter that used to be distributed before the ban, now we are still left with 5, and they are all reusable.
And if I wanna now to kind of shed the light on some game-changing initiatives, because we kind of, you know, hear from you that a lot is happening. Do you have examples that could, you know, inspire our audience and perhaps as well the private sector of, you know, initiatives happening right now in the UAE?
So I think I'll come in here because, you know, Monir's laid down a challenge to us as industry. In 2019, we came together as a Circle Coalition, which was an industry forum. There were 14 major companies from the full value chain. So from the petrochem industry all the way through packaging, through to the FMCG, through to retail. And we conducted a study in partnership with the Environment Agency in Abu Dhabi and Emirates Nature WWF. And it was all around the barriers and enablers of the circular economy in Abu Dhabi, in that particular waste management sector. And what we did was we collected material, and Veolia was one of our partners, so we collected material from private contracts, which was clean segregated material, but we also collected material direct from landfill. And that material was then processed, it was recycled, and it was converted by a partner in Abu Dhabi into plastic pallets for logistics, and water racks and water crates, which the companies then purchased back. So this was the proof of concept. And during that study, we came out with 35 recommendations as enablers of the circular economy. And one of the ones which was strongly promoted by the industry forum at the time was extended producer responsibility. We are very much in favor of bringing this in as a policy initiative and as a framework, because what we need is a very fair and equitable and tiered, phased approach to putting extended producer responsibility. Let's remember that in the EU, this journey started with them back in the 1980s. And it started as a waste management strategy. What we're talking about now is using this as a circular economy strategy. So it's completely leapfrogging what has been done over the last 20, 30 years in Europe. There's a lot of initiatives that are taking place on an individual basis with the companies. But what we need is scale. And it's all very well to talk to the multinationals. What we need to do is to talk to the small and medium enterprises here in the UAE. And let's not forget that 70% of the GDP and the revenue is actually delivered by small and medium enterprises. So I think we're in the right space. I think it is the right time. I think Monir and the Environment Agency have been working for a very long time trying to get these initiatives, implemented and so on. But I think, Monir, it's not going to take too long before we actually see your dreams our dreams coming to fruition.
I think you're right, Sarah. It's a mindset shift at the end of the day. So circular economy is completely different way of doing the business. And you mentioned, because all the examples that you mentioned are multinationals.
Yes.
And what about the SMEs? How do you engage the SMEs in this journey?
Yes.
I think I can talk only about Abu Dhabi because first I'm a government official that works in Abu Dhabi, so I have to talk about Abu Dhabi. We have worked with baqalas, for example, the small grocery shops in Abu Dhabi. We have visited 1,700 baqalas in Abu Dhabi while deploying or implementing the single-use plastic policy. We've worked with many of the small enterprises operating in Abu Dhabi in the different supply chain of products. And I could tell you that, number one, first, we are blessed. We are living in this community. They are a very receptive community. It's a very receptive community. What we could have achieved here, it took other countries many years to achieve. The pace of development is very fast, but at the same time, people are very receptive to new ideas and new thoughts, and especially when they feel that it is a problem. Then we come to behavior. Behavior with individuals. This requires the collective effort of everybody. SMEs, large corporations, governments, and the different actors. I could tell you, for example, plastic bottles is a challenge. We consume around 400 to 600, 700 bottles per person per year in the UAE. In Abu Dhabi, we have conducted a survey on our marine coastlines, and we found that in very remote areas, we have one bottle every 2 meters of the coastlines, which is a lot. In offshore islands that nobody's living there to find plastic bottles. So that's why we need to provide incentives, and that's why we're working with Veolia through RECAP, and we're working with others to deploy bottle return infrastructure, whether it is through the return vending machines, smart bins, whatever it is, and give incentives. Our leadership wants the community to be given incentives to change their behavior, to know that there is a value in that resource, and it should not end up in the environment in one way or another. Lots of inspiring stories. I'm full of hope that the future will bring a dramatic change to the way we are doing business. Business as usual is no longer an option for anyone.
Absolutely. Any initiative, Ronald, that you wanna highlight in the discussion?
Yeah, sure. But Sarah and Monir raised 2 points. Scaling up is an important, very important point. There are a lot of initiatives today, for example, on the collection. Sarah mentioned one of them. We have others. There are many. The main challenge is how to scale up those initiatives, because what counts at the end of the day is being able to capture this plastic. The second point you mentioned, the initiative led by international companies. I can give you many examples where national leading companies in the food and bev have been at the forefront of all those initiatives. We've been working for 3 years, for example, with Agdia Group, who believe from the very beginning at the importance of building up a really circular economy for the benefits of everyone. Now, given the initiatives, yes, in Veolia, we've been implementing initiatives for some quite good time. Here in the UAE, we developed 3 years ago a RECAP, which is a door-to-door collection system for recyclable, mainly plastic packaging. And it's been growing very quickly for the last 2 years, mainly in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. 50,000 users, and the community, RECAP community, is growing every day. And this is an amazing system to raise awareness, to liaise with the consumers, and to make this change. We're working on a lot of projects to invest in plastic recycling facilities, and to do this link between the producer from one side, the consumer from the other, and the recycler, the final producer and the recycler from the other side, in order to close the loop that needs to be closed.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to make the link between plastic recycling and the UAE vision when it comes to sustainability. So how, working on plastic recycling and fighting basically, plastic pollution can help to achieve some of the targets set by the UAE government, and one of them being, for instance, achieving net zero by 2050. Can you explain us the link between the two?
Yes, for sure. I mentioned briefly the details of the results of the ban on plastic bags. And we calculated the greenhouse gas emissions savings from the amount of plastic avoided, which was estimated at 272,000 tons, and just from plastic bags, which is, to make it more appealing to understand, it is equivalent to burning around 600,000 barrels of oil. The emissions coming out of 600,000 barrels of oil. This is only plastic bags. And when we talk about bottles and recovery of bottles, it's the same thing. So it has a climate impact towards reaching net zero. But I think the most important, I could say, national target that this would help is diversion from landfills. We want to recover as much as possible in the waste streams. Try to reduce at source from the beginning, and try to divert the destiny of waste from landfills into other useful applications through recycling.
All these initiatives around plastics, around circular economy, circularity, that need to be considered one by one in order to reach the net zero target. It's not one initiative. Sure, mobility remains the main contributor in CO2 emission. Energy remains the second one, but all the other aspects of our day-to-day life has to have an impact, and plastic will be a big contributor of the net zero. But as we said during the discussion, it needs to be channeled. It needs to be well segregated, well collected, well transformed, well recycled, and
well avoided.
Well avoided at the very beginning, in order to make sure that ultimately we have the net zero target achieved, and at the same time the full circular economy achieved. And this is the challenge, and this is great because we were working on it in a country that is allowing us to do it.
Yeah.
A challenge and an opportunity at the same time. So, So we end the podcast with always the same question to all our guests. So what's the one action that we can take to turn the tide and build a more sustainable future?
Well, one has to be mindful about your consumption habits. Responsible consumption is the first and most important thing. Every single consumption choice we make can have either a positive or a negative impact on the planet. And that's the choice that we have to make. We have to be informed as consumers, and we need to be really mindful about how we go about living our lives so that we can minimize the impact on the planet.
I could talk directly to the consumers, say avoid and recover as much as possible. Avoid using the product if you don't need it, the package if you don't need it, and recover if you have to use it. Try not to leave it anywhere. Leave it in a dedicated area, reuse it as much as possible, and then leave it in a dedicated area where the professionals will come and do their job.
I started with myself, with my family, and this is where everything starts, by selecting adequately the product we're consuming, and whenever there's a packaging in the product we're consuming, by recycling it or at least putting it in the right channel, whereby I know that they will be recycled properly. I think starting by ourselves, starting by our way we consume and what we do with the end of life of the product we're consuming, for me is key to start the change.
So it starts with us and being responsible.
Yes.
Join Recap as a subscriber.
Thing on download.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sara, Monir, and Ronald. It was a very, very insightful conversation. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise and experiences, in this discussion.
Thank you.
So this is the end of our podcast. Please help us amplify the message around plastic pollution by sharing this podcast with your network. And subscribe to our channel, leave your comments, and stay tuned for our upcoming episode.